All right, everyone. We're going to be talking about money, which can be a contentious subject in the church, but we're specifically talking about ways that financial mismanagement can occur. So while sensitive, this is a very important subject. In fact, it's always right in front of people when churches publish the numbers for the week. Typically, it's worship attendance and giving. Matt, my friend Matt, who is a part of Church Answers. Many of you may not know who Matt is. Matt, what is your? I'm president of the company. I don't know what your title is. What is your title?
Sam, I'm not sure what my title is either with Church Answers, but I do a lot with consulting, certifications, and partnerships.
Well, just put a bunch of commas in your title.
There
That's
you
what we'll
go.
do. So anyway, Matt McCraw is not McGraw,
That's correct.
not related to Tim. There's an extra C in there. Is part of our team. He's been on the show before, but some of you may not know him because you don't appear often. But you might be seeing a little more of him going forward. So glad for that. Do you publish? My question is: do you publish your worship attendance and your giving? What numbers do you put out there for everyone to see?
We publish our giving. We do not publish our worship numbers in the weekly bulletin. We do have them in our business meetings generally. We publish our giving once a month, so we update it monthly.
Very
And our
good.
expenses. We include our expenses as well, giving and expenses.
So there it is, front and center, just like a lot of other established churches. Hey, I want to talk about church growth services. They can really help with generosity. That's kind of pertaining to today's subject matter. So we'll put a link in the show notes. They've got a free campaign capacity analysis, which is really neat. So go check that out. And I also want to thank our sponsor, Upward. Upward is a longtime sponsor. I guess I can say that now, Matt. You manage sponsorships too, like
Yeah, long time. Very
long-time
faithful. Great
sponsor,
sponsor.
and love working with them. When we were able to have them as a sponsor, I was cheering along because I absolutely love their ministry. It is awesome to be able to support them. Now it's November, so you should be looking at 2025 at this point. They would love to talk to you about creating a sports ministry in 2025. They can bridge your church to the community. Get the question all the time. We see it all the time in our forum, right? How do I do outreach in my church? And we have some answers that we often give: ESL classes, fostering, and then there's always Upward Sports. It's a great way to make that connection. So go schedule your call today. You can go to upward.org/church answers. Again, upward.org/church answers to do that. It's worth the financial investment to tie back to the topic at hand. All right, but let's talk about financial mismanagement, which does happen at times. And some common ways that financial mismanagement occurs in the church. Matt, I'm just going to put you on the spot. Have you ever encountered this, whether it be at a church, an association, at the denominational level? Have you ever seen financial mismanagement occur, and what was the story?
Yeah, so I certainly have, and so I'll keep it sort of vague, but on a denominational level, I saw where a particular organization was defrauded of lots of money because of not double or triple checking. Basically, they were scammed. So I saw that happen, and I've also seen on just an unwise level. I've seen finances handled in several local churches of which I've been a part, just not handled in a wise way, not necessarily unethical, but just where a little more wisdom would have been helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction, the difference between unethical and unwise. Just because someone made a poor decision and did not exercise wisdom does not necessarily mean that they were maliciously trying to do something. And I know that story that you're talking about. It was a link that would be used to send money, and the scammer kind of knew the link and put a link that was very similar looking, and the page looked identical. And so the person that was responsible for punching in the numbers was punching in the numbers to the wrong bank, and it was the bank of the scammer.
Yeah, it was a terrible, sad mistake. It wasn't one that was easy to spot, quite honestly, but it was a mistake.
Yeah, that's actually a very difficult one and pretty rare. You don't often see that. But in this case, it was big money involved. And so it was kind of worth the effort. But let's talk about some common ways that mismanagement occurs in the local church. I think that's what most of our audience is connected to. Although we do have plenty of denominational people listening. Check those links. Make sure you're sending money to the right place. So one way that you see financial mismanagement occur, and again, this could be unethical or it could just be unwise, is major spending outside of the budget. Um, this is where the church sets the budget, and then somebody in leadership, whoever it may be, could be a pastor or committee or elder board, starts spending money outside of that budget. Matt, where would you say that's most common, that major spending outside the budget?
I would say in the churches I've been a part of, that's mostly in deferred maintenance. Things, major maintenance projects that were not budgeted and they don't have a deferred maintenance fund. Something comes up and they have to deal with it.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And honestly, in many of those cases, you just kind of have to do it. I don't know that I would call that financial mismanagement. That may be facility mismanagement, budget mismanagement. Uh, it's almost like when I just got word that we're gonna have to do some extra stuff with the air conditioning project. Nothing too major, and it can be handled the way that we were planning on handling it. But my executive pastor just let me know. So I was like, yeah, we got to spend that money. We weren't planning to spend that money, but we have to spend that money. I've actually seen this is the case that I got to be careful what I say, but I won't be careful. I'll just say it anyway. I know of a church. Let me put it that way. I know of a church, not my church. I know of a church where one of the pastors wanted to feed the entire community for Thanksgiving, like the entire town, like turkey dinner or whatever it was. I forget the specifics. And it was a good thought. Hey, church is going to be generous and feed the entire community. Guess what? It wasn't budgeted. And they spent, and I forget the exact number. I don't remember the exact number, but it was five figures, well into the
Wow.
five figures, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000. I forget exactly. But it was that expensive just to give everyone a free dinner, and the church had not budgeted it. So is that unethical? Well, if somebody means harm, yes. But in this case, I think it was just more unwise, but certainly mismanagement. So if you're going to feed everyone a turkey dinner in your city, make sure you budget it.
Yeah, Sam,
Next,
that might fall into what we call pastor's pet projects. Something the pastor really wants to accomplish and get it pushed through, and it's not budgeted. And sometimes they just go ahead anyhow. So we got to
I
be
like
careful
that.
with those.
I like that. Pastors, pet projects. Um, the next thing is using part of the budget for unintended purposes. So the money's there, it's in a line item. That line item has a specific purpose. I'm going to take this money and I'm going to use it for something else. Matt, where have you seen that in the church?
Yeah, well, again, pastor's pet projects could fall there as well. You could say, hey, we have this money set aside for curriculum for the church. And, I'd really like to get a new computer. Once in a while, I view curriculum on my computer. So let's use the curriculum budget to buy a new computer. It's just not what it's intended to be used for. So I think we really have to be careful with that because the reality is sometimes in the budgeting process, we don't do a good job accounting for everything that we might need. And so we do need to be careful on that, but we also need to be wise and follow the budget items that we've set in place.
Yeah, so an example of this would be wow, we've grown as a church. We're just buying a lot more coffee and snacks and hospitality stuff. And oh man, the hospitality budget is not nearly what we need it to be. And we've got our big church dinner coming up. So, our volunteer dinner or whatever. So, we're going to pull from children's ministry because they've got a few little extra funds. Well, the proper thing to do there is to just run over your budget and account for it, to just show that you went over. A budget is a guide. And, granted, there are some churches like ours that you're not really supposed to spend over your budget unless you have permission. But, you could just say, hey, we realize that we're going to be spending more here. We're doing the Lord's Supper more often, so we're spending more on Lord's Supper supplies. So you run over on that budget so that the next year you know what to budget. So don't be moving things around in the budget to even out all the budget line items. And I think lots of churches do that.
Yeah, just a real life example, Sam. At the time of this recording, we're just a little past our trunk or treat at our church, and we had more people than we expected. We had to go buy a lot more candy on the spot. And one of our other pastors mentioned, "Hey, we're at budget for this." I said, "Well, we'll just go over budget rather than trying to take it from somewhere else. We'll go over budget. We've got the blessing of the stewardship committee to do that, and it will help us budget better next year."
Another way that financial mismanagement occurs is by hiding personal expenses. So let me tell you one way that this happens frequently. And if you're doing this, you need to stop. But I realize that you may not be doing it maliciously. So I have a budget for taking people out for like lunch and dinner. And the church has been very gracious. West Bradenton's been very gracious. Hey, all the new people, you're going to want to take them out. Person who's thinking about joining the church, let's do lunch, let's do dinner, and they provide me it's not a big budget, but it's enough to get to go out to several lunches and dinners a year. On occasion, I will take my family, and I try to remember to reimburse the church for that part because I really should not be charging. I should not be including my family in that expense. That is a personal expense. Now, very rarely is my family with me at these meetings. Sometimes my wife comes, and I really do work hard to kind of pull that out. A rare occurrence is not a big deal in this, but if you are regularly taking people out for lunch on church money, which is a fine thing to do, you really shouldn't be including your family, and particularly if they're there a lot, it would be better to strip that out. But that's a small thing, but that's one way that personal expenses can get hidden in the budget.
Yeah, I would say also another way would be conferences. Just going on a conference, paying for certain things while you're gone. Sometimes we may think, well, this will just blend in with all the expenses, but that's not a healthy way for us to think. That can lead us quickly into unethical practices. So I think having a good paper trail and when in doubt, pay for it yourself is my rule of thumb.
Yeah, this next way that financial mismanagement occurs in the church is by um, burying unnecessary expenses in vague line items. Um, there's a documentary out there right now on a famous megachurch pastor, and I don't want to get into too much detail about it, but that is, whether true or not, that is the accusation of him, that you have this big fund that money goes in it, and it's a vague line item, and we're not quite sure what comes out of it either. And in this case, they're claiming millions of dollars. I think for most of our listeners, it's like, yeah, my church would never let me spend millions of dollars in a vague line item. But Matt, do you have any experience here? Like, what's something that may come to mind as like, hey, don't bury that in a vague line item. Be clear about it.
Well, actually, Sam, we just fixed this. We went through the budgeting process this past month at my church, and we just fixed an issue we've had for a few years. We had a category; it was actually labeled uncategorized expenses, and I said we cannot keep the label uncategorized expenses on a budget line item. We have to label it as something, and so we set ourselves up for that. Really, it was used mostly for bank fees, and so I said, why don't we name it bank fees, or something like that, online transaction fees. And so, yeah, we've had experience with that. And there was a time when we used, someone made a request and we took an expense out of there that was just nowhere else to take it. And I thought that's not best practice. So we've tried to do better in our own church in that regard.
So let's talk about solving these problems. Major spending outside the budget, using part of the budget for unintended purposes, hiding personal expenses, burying unnecessary expenses in vague line items. What do you do to solve this? And I think the first step is just very simple. Have a consistent process. Just if you want to change your process, change it. Just be clear that you're changing it and stick to it. Whatever you say you're going to do, you should do. Matt, what's your budget process look like?
Yeah, so we have a stewardship committee, and our stewardship committee works with our financial secretary to kind of see where our spending is. We look at the process. We see if we need to make any adjustments, our pastors speak into that. The stewardship committee approves it, then the church approves it with discussion. And so that's our normal budgeting process. And then if we go above and beyond the budget, if it's a $500 expenditure or less, the pastors can approve that without getting special permission. If it's above that, we speak to our treasurer and our stewardship committee chairman. And then if it's above $10,000, the church has to approve it if it's beyond the budget. If it's under $10,000, the stewardship committee can approve it. Those are some of our general guidelines we go by.
Pretty good guidelines. We have similar ones as well. Another way to solve this problem is just to have multiple checks by multiple people. So we never have money is never alone with anyone. Children are never alone with anyone in our church, and money is never alone with anyone in our church. So anytime we have somebody counting, transporting, anytime money needs to go in and out of accounts, there's always two sets of eyes on it. We do have a bookkeeper who sits down at a computer and works through things, but then we have a treasurer and a stewardship committee that goes back and double checks to make sure that everything is done. The treasurer is in the bookkeeper's office quite often, just to make sure that all processes were followed. And I'm very grateful for the tight processes that we have at West Bradenton. Multiple checks by multiple people. Matt, is that something that you guys do as well?
Yeah, we do that as well. Honestly, Sam, we're trying to do better with no money alone with people. In years past, we were short on volunteers, and if the offering had to be counted, somebody would take it down to the office, and we've tried to do better there. I said, hey, we can't be alone with money, so we're trying to follow that process as well. The other thing I would add to that is not only having the policies, but knowing the policies. A lot of churches have great policies, but people don't know what they are. They haven't seen them in a while, and they may not follow them. So I think it's important to keep them in front of your people as well.
Yeah, and then another solution is just transparent reporting. It boggles my mind how many churches don't produce like quarterly financial statements. I don't know that monthly is necessary. I think that's fine. If you're producing a monthly financial statement and providing it to your people, that's excellent. I don't know that everyone wants to see it every month. Maybe some do, but at least quarterly, you should be putting something out there, and not just the fancy smancy pie charts that everyone has and look at what we did. And those are great. I think that you should absolutely champion your cause with those very fancy booklets that people put out. They're very impressive. But man, just put out your financial statements. People should be able to see every line item and what came in, what went out, where you are in the budget. At a bare minimum, a profit and loss statement. We actually do a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement every quarter for our church. I don't know if that's necessary, but Matt, do you do a balance sheet as well? What do you do?
Yeah, so we developed a simple we call it the treasurer's report, and we have that every month for our stewardship committee, and then once a quarter for the church. Now we do make it very clear if you want to come in and see it every week, you're certainly welcome to do that. But we provide it in print once a quarter. We simplified it. It's only 2 pages. The reason is we found with some of the balance sheets, profit and loss reports, some of our folks couldn't read them. They had no idea what they were looking at. So we offered a simple version, and we still have the more complicated, more thorough version available.
Yeah, and I think you're on to something. We've encountered that as well. We've had to simplify our financial statements only because there are a lot of people that don't know how to read them. Hey, while we're talking about simplifying something that can be complicated, check out Brown Church Development Group. They do master planning, and they can certainly help with your facility. So I would encourage you to reach out to them if you're thinking about master planning and putting that in your budget. If it's not something that you've ever done before, hey, now's the time. If you have time to put it in your budget, put it in there. Give them a call. They are awesome at what they do, and so they can help you on the facility side while you're thinking about the financial side. So transparent reporting is always a good thing. And again, if you want to change your process, change it. If you want to do something different, do something different. Just tell people what you're doing and tell them why you're doing it. And most times it's going to be fine. Last thing here. All right. How do you solve this problem of financial mismanagement? Again, a lot falls on just leadership accountability. Just making sure that there are clear ways that people are held accountable to do what they're supposed to be doing. One of the things that I do as a lead pastor is I have zero access to any of the funds. I have zero access to the books. I don't see who gives what. I realize there are different perspectives on that, and there are good perspectives on either side, whether you should know what people give or not. At my church, I get reports and I get ideas of people, but I don't get a name and an amount. I never see that. We just went through a hurricane, so an example here, I got a list of people that gave to the hurricane fund, both inside and outside the church. So I'm going to write them all a handwritten note, but I didn't see what they gave. So I think it's good to just understand lead pastor, executive pastor, staff, elders. What are they seeing? What are they not seeing? Why? And how do we make sure that they're being held accountable to those standards? Matt, I'm sure you're similar there too.
Yeah, so we have a policy even with two pastors together, we don't handle money, we don't take money. We have drop boxes, so we have a no pastors touching money policy. Very similar to you in terms of knowing who gives and how much. I don't really know much of that. Sometimes folks will tell me. I just had someone recently, they sent some money in from an investment. They wanted to make sure I knew it was coming just so we could look for it, things like that. But generally, I don't know. I would also say, Sam, just this goes not only for pastors and staff, but just for anyone. We should never be defensive to answer questions about money or how we handle money. We should be totally open. We should be just totally transparent, totally humble, totally willing to answer any question. We should not hide anything when it comes to money. Of course, Jesus warned us about the dangers of money, and so we need to take that seriously, and we need to be above board with finances for sure.
Yeah, and we actually have a module on this in a new resource called Make My Church Safe. So go to makemychurchsafe.com, and it's a comprehensive training for church safety, but it includes financial management. So there's a module in it for that that your financial team can review. It's got everything else too that you would need for church safety, but financial management's part of that, and you certainly don't want to mismanage things financially. So check things out at makemychurchsafe.com. And we also want to thank our sponsor, California Baptist University. They've got a full breadth of courses through their online degrees, also a beautiful campus if you want to go in person. So you can learn more about them at Cal Baptist, that's CAL Baptist.edu. They've got a great online bachelor's degree in Christian ministries, which I really like. So if that's something that you are more than interested in, or even if just partially interested in, you should still reach out to them. calbaptist.edu is where you can go. So thanks for tuning in today. Thank you, Matt, for joining us on the show. We'll have to bring you back on. In fact, guess what? We're recording an episode right after this, and I know that you're going to be on the next one too.
Looking
So
forward to it. Yeah.
for our listeners, will Matt be back? Yes, he will, in just a moment. At least for me. But for you, it'll be next week. We'll see you then.